Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. As today we are going to finish out First Samuel, and I have the sneaking suspicion there may be a second Samuel. Welcome aboard, everybody.
I think you're onto something there, Aaron.
There was only always just one Samuel.
Just like there was only ever one of all the prophets.
There was also one Corinthian,
Well,
and his name was Joe.
Oh, they had to split it up because the scroll was probably just too big to hold it all. So,
all right, anybody got any opening comments?
Well, I got one. First, it's nice to have Kip back when he, once in a blue moon remembers that we exist.
I can only come when I have Saturdays, which isn't especially often. So it's nice. It's a treat, and I haven't read the text, so that's always fun too.
Part of the Bible Kip hasn't read. Great.
I mean,
don't give any spoilers now.
I mean,
everybody dies.
So-called
at the
Bible
end.
Scholar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have a cold, so I will not be reading.
So when I say that, I mean I haven't taken a close read of the text in a long time. So I've read it at various points.
I'm just joshing you, or whatever the kids say these days.
Joshing. I get it. It's funny. Very funny, Lawrence. You're a funny guy.
All right. So how about we get started with the reading?
Today?
I think I'll read chapter 29.
And what version are you going to be doing?
Oh, well, see, it's the NRSV UE, but it's in the SBL Study Bible.
So you can't follow along.
Well, you can. It's the same translation as online, but it just has like a lot more notes. All right, so chapter 29. Now the Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, while the Israelites were encamped by the spring that is in Jezreel. As the lords of the Philistines were passing on by hundreds and by thousands, and David and his men were passing on in the rear with Achish, the commanders of the Philistines said, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" Achish said to the commanders of the Philistines, "Is this not David, the servant of King Saul of Israel, who has been with me now for days and years? Since he deserted to me, I have found no fault in him to this day." But the commanders of the Philistines were angry with him. And the commanders of the Philistines said to him, "Send the man back, so that he may return to the place that you have assigned to him. He shall not go down with us to battle, or else he may become an adversary to us in the battle. For how could this fellow reconcile himself to his Lord? Would it not be with the heads of the men here? Is this not David, of whom they sing to one another in dances? Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Then Achish called David and said to him, "As the Lord lives, you have been honest, and excuse me. To me, it seems right that you should march out and in with me in the campaign. For I have found nothing wrong with you from the day of your coming to me until today. Nevertheless, the lords do not approve of you. So go back now and go peaceably. Do nothing to displease the lords of the Philistines." David said to Achish, "But what have I done?" You know what you did, David. What have you found in your servant from the day I entered your service until now, that I should not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish replied to David, "I know that you are as blameless in my sight as an angel of God. Nevertheless, The commanders of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to the battle. Now then, rise early in the morning, you and the servants of your Lord who came with you, and go to the place that I appointed for you. As for the evil report, do not take it to heart, for you have done well before me. Start early in the morning and leave as soon as you have light. So David set out with his men early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines. To return to the land of the Philistines. But the Philistines went up to Jezreel.
I just have to say that I noticed that Lawrence's mic is sometimes glitching.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
How much of that did you catch? Like most of it?
I catched some of it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh really?
Is there? Yeah,
Oh.
I think we got most of it. All of it. Is there a difference in verse 10 or verse 9 between the Masoretic and the Septuagint? With I think there's like an extra bit there that you read. Like, do
Yeah,
not
there
take
is.
this word to
There
the
is.
heart.
Yeah, it says elsewhere for verse 9. Elsewhere, David is given credit for having the insight of an angel of God. But the Septuagint is probably correct in omitting the phrase in this passage.
Oh, okay, that's a different thing. So being acceptable to me as an angel of God is not in the Septuagint.
I mean, at least according to this, not. I can check it, but yeah.
Oh, but is there
Yeah,
like an
but-
extra bit in verse 10 that says,
Yeah,
"Oh,
yes.
and don't pay no
Yeah,
heed
angel
to
of
those
God is
words."
missing
There is.
in the Septuagint. But there's
there
a
is-
big section.
There is a large expansion by Septuagint. Though I would say that the Masoretic text is preserved by most early translations and the Lucianic recension.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's
Aaron,
interesting
you're
that
muted.
a lot of the things that Akisha's saying, well, not a lot of them, just a few of them. So when he mentions specifically that I know that you are as blameless in my sight as an angel of God. So even in just that sentence, like that's a phrase we see a lot for God. So like when you are blameless in like the sight of God or God, you have done nothing wrong in in God's eyes, stuff like that. So like that's it's interesting that that's language that we usually just see associated with God that used for Akisha.
It is unusual that this Philistine king would be saying, "You are blameless, in the sight of the Lord to me," and like having that be a reference to a Jewish version of God. Though I don't know, this bit is one of the few things. It's a bit of an embarrassing errors argument, but it's one of the few things that makes me think there might be something reality based behind this. Because how do they contrive that David betrayed Israel and Judah and became a vassal of the Philistine king that he got fame for fighting against initially? Maybe not that specific king, but that kingdom. And that he was, got out of it by God, actually being directly ordered to fight against Israel. Because in this, like, Achish is going to war against Israel, and David is just marching like, "Yep, guess we're gonna go kill Jews." The narrative behind the scenes that I was fed, of course, was that he, was praying that the Lord would find a way to get him out of this because he had given his word to follow the king, but also he can't, but also, yada, yada, yada. So people complain, and then he doesn't have to do the bad thing. Look at that. Oh, it's magic. Deus Ex Machina. Very, very thematically appropriate. But I don't know. It's just like,
Well,
where the hell did this come from?
They put a lot of
He
stuff on
wasn't.
Akish that seems to put him in this camp of like at least following the same faith as David.
Which is
so-
weird.
It is, yeah. So the authors are like now trying to at least add in a little bit of or maybe other authors would have taken out. I don't know. I'm sure Kip has ideas on this. But yeah, they're kind of because of this close association with David and how much Akisha's helped them. They're like, oh well, obviously he must have been a believer or something. I don't know. But they added a lot of stuff, right? So they added not just like is this not this is in the mouths of the Philistines, right? Is this not David of whom they sing to one another in dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. we'll see that a few times. I think we've already seen it a few times.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then yeah, the whole blameless in my sight as an angel of God. So they've added quite a few things to and then I think what was he said, as my Lord lives, which is also like a very common phrase. So yeah, it seems like they're adding on this this faith
I
to the Philistine
wonder.
to
I
Akish.
wonder if there was an earlier version of this story, because as we will see, Saul's death there are many conflicting accounts of Saul's death. I'm wondering if.
Spoilers, Lilith.
Oh yeah, I know. We just had the witch talk about how much he was going to die last time. But I wonder if there was one of the versions that involved David claiming the throne by force with the help of Achish, unseating Saul because unstable ruler or God moved something or whatever, and killing Saul in battle. And that at one point this would have been considered then he had the right to rule, but that didn't look good in later narratives, where they wanted to keep the idea of the sacredness and the untouchable against the anointed, and so they changed it.
I don't know how you have multiple conflicting reports of somebody's death. When does it ever happen that you don't know whether somebody was killed with a candlestick in the library or whether it was a pipe wrench in the drawing room?
Well, in fairness, I mean, how many deathbed confessions of the faith have the believers invented for atheists?
True, a lot.
Yeah.
But
I do have a
I've
question
heard
here.
an apologetic for the Saul one, because the second one in, I think it's 2 Samuel 1, right? So Saul is gonna die at the end of this book. And his the account of his death is different than the account given by an Amalekite in the next book. So they're like, well, obviously the Amalekite lied. I'm like, you know what, fine, whatever. Like, whatever, man.
I mean that's what some of the scholars that I've read say. Yeah, he lied. But when we'll get to 2 Samuel 1, then.
Okay, I have a question here. When one person is being recognized as an angel of God, I'm wondering what exactly does it take to become an angel of God?
Because he's saying as you are as blameless in my sight as an angel of God.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Because
I thought you just had to lose all your genitals and everyone wanted to bang you.
Angels
I
were
don't
seen
know
as
if
like,
that's-
you know, blameless, maybe even without any free will. Like they can't sin, they can only do the
I
will
don't
of
know
God
if
sort of thing.
that's necessarily understood as a spiritual being in this particular text either. Yeah, I mean it certainly could be, but like a malach Adonai could be, or malach Elohim could be a person too.
Yeah, it can refer to a messenger or a prophet as well.
Yeah, prophet maybe, like a man of God. But
Yeah,
also,
I mean,
like in this, I mean, if it was just this verse, then you could excuse it and say, you know, Elohim can also mean the gods. So it could be like Akish could have been calling him, you know, a messenger of the gods, or an angel of the gods, or a man of the gods.
Well, he
but
just,
the problem
he
is
just
that
said you're blameless in my eyes as one of the gods or messengers of God.
But if you go back to, as you said, Lawrence, if you go back to verse 6, he says, "As the Lord lives," which is Chai Yahweh, right? So that's specifically naming the God.
Okay, now you just said Yehovah. Everybody corrected me a few weeks ago when I was saying
I caught
it's because I was literally looking at the word and reading it. That's
I say Yehovah because that's how the Masoretic text has it. But it's
that's how it's pointed.
Based on Elohim.
I vote that we use the original version from the town that the Israelites stole their God from and call him Yahoo.
Yahoo.
Yahoo was that's
and
there's also Yah or
it might also just be Yah. Some of our earliest, all the theophorics, well, not all of them, but many of the theophorics are just Yah.
Adonai Yah.
Our earlier texts are just Yah.
I think the issue with saying Yahoo like the 4-letter, the Tetragrammaton is making it, if it's Yahuwah, is that like to use a vav as a vowel sign is like much later idea, I think. So it wouldn't make sense to have a consonant representing a vowel. If you have that consonant in the word, then it would be pronounced.
All right. Well, I've got a couple comments I've got to read. So the Sinister Porpoise offers $5 and says, this is far more entertaining than using data science on the Book of Mormon to find out Joseph Smith was the sole author. A surprise to no one. Actually, it was a surprise to me to find out that he wasn't the sole author, that there were other people helping him with that. Because that just muddies things. It was a lot easier for me to understand how one guy made all this shit up. But how do you get other people to join you in making their own shit up?
I mean, there were bits that sounded like he just copy-pasted somebody else's sermon. Like this was literally a sermon that somebody had said in church. He literally just lifted the whole text.
Yeah, maybe.
In there.
Minute Rice 1954 says, Aaron, your shirt today is kick-ass. I knew this book is riveting and all, but there is that Snake Appreciation Day today. Shut up.
Minute Rice. Shut the fuck up.
Seconded. Shut the fuck up.
So we'll be ending early today, Aaron? Is that what you're saying? You have another commitment?
Every day is Snake Appreciation.
Let's just try to be efficient in the show today.
Look, we finish the book, and whenever we finish the book, I can go lay down and stuff myself full of cold medication.
Well,
all right.
We're off to a fantastic start. I think we've managed to read 10 verses in English.
11.
So, way to go! 11.
Try to be efficient.
It's a way better rate than Kip's reading Hebrew streams.
And then Matt White says, Lawrence, we no longer say witch. It's techno-pagan.
Lawrence with an S.
Yeah, with an S.
I mean, your name is already wrong, so why not make it longer? Yeah. Okay, so I'll start my commentary, and it's only 2 pages. There's not a lot to say here, at least in my opinion. You spent 20 minutes talking about it. So, okay, on verse 3, start on verse 3. Is this not David who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? Achish defends David by stating that he was a servant or Oved of Saul, and that David was on Achish's side for a year or 2, literally now for days or now for years. Klein writes that Achish seems to know nothing of David's pro-Judean raids from Ziklag in chapter 27, or of his earlier bizarre behavior in 21 verses 10 through 15.
Oh yeah, it was the same Achish that he played crazy in front of and started drooling.
Yeah, but I mean...
I thought that was
he's
a
an
different
upstanding
thing.
young man.
Yeah.
He might not have, maybe he didn't realize that they were the same person. He's like, oh, there was a madman here earlier, and now this guy comes in with 600 soldiers to fight for me, a mercenary. Like, he wouldn't have.
That's a good point. I mean, why would you even make that connection? In the first place, right?
I've already noted, like previously, that there are some who say that these are 2 different kings, but
well, it's probably 2 different stories, right?
Well,
but
obviously he ended up in Achish's zone, and we have to get him out of there without him having done anything wrong. That the Philistines can't know that he didn't do anything wrong, so he's crazy and or a double agent.
I kind of like. Can I just say on verse 3, I'm intrigued by the Hebrew expression here at the end. I found in him nothing from the day Naflo until this day. Yeah, until the day of his falling. Until this day, falling away from Saul.
JPS translates it as the day he defected.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's interesting to me.
Steinsaltz translates it as the day he encamped with me. So like he fell off his camel, I guess.
The day he threw down with me.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, Targum has he departed to me to this day.
Oh,
okay.
Which one?
Jonathan.
Which
It's
okay.
the Targum on prophets is just Jonathan. There's no more.
Oh,
Targums.
right. This is prophets. Sorry.
Yeah, that's prophets.
Whoops.
I didn't even know that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. On verse 4, the heads
embarrassing.
of our on verse 4, the heads of our own men. Hebrew Bible reads, the heads of these men. This reading is attested in the Septuagint and Targum. The parallel in 1 Chronicles 12:20, which is 19 in the Old Testament, reads, our heads, a reading attested by Vulgate and Peshitta. Kimchi, followed by Ibn Kaspi and Tsumura, takes those men to be a euphemism for us. Tsumura notes that R.P. Gordon already noted the euphemistic use of the Aramaic expression that man, hahu gavra, in Sokolov's dictionary.
Yeah, I guess if you're gonna say like bring a curse upon us, they want to talk about us in third person, so it's like less of a evil eye sort of thing. Yeah.
On verse 6, as surely as the Lord lives. It seems odd that Akish says this, since it is unlikely that he was a Yahwist. McCarter and Klein wrote that it was either just a slip of the Yahwistic narrator, or it intends to show special courtesy to David. Tsumura notes one possibility, that the narrator put this formula in Akish's mouth, even though he actually had used a different formula, such as Dagon lives, which the narrator wanted to avoid. He writes, however, that for polytheistic people, to make an oath in the name of other gods, of gods other than the gods they normally serve, is not unthinkable. Kimchi wrote that Akish did believe in Yahweh, since, quote, all admit that he was the first cause, end quote. Bar-Efrat quotes Moshe Tedeschi, aka Ho'il Moshe, quote, idol worshippers believed in all the gods, and in order to silence David's complaints, Akish swore by his God, end quote. Ibn Kaspi suggested that Akish swore to Yahweh so that David might believe in Akish more.
Yeah. It's like, it's not that problematic, I guess, but it is still weird from like a modern, like, I guess, religious perspective.
Yeah, I mean, polytheists weren't like you said, they didn't have issues recognizing other gods. If you went to a city, you'd pay courtesies to the local god, just like you'd pay courtesies to the local ruler of whatever kind, or it was just courtesy. But again, that was back when gods were said to have specific areas they ruled over. So even if you believe in Yahweh, Yahweh rules over the land of the Jews. You're not going to invoke him generally if you're attacking his land.
Yeah, and also like the previous chapter, was it, where it was like, oh, you go to another place, you go to serve another god. So it's like, shouldn't it be the other way around, that David should be, mentioning the local god as opposed to the local ruler mentioning David's god from home? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it could be a slip of the Yahweh's tongue, or an attempt to make this character more sympathetic, since he does help David, albeit he is also deceived and double tricked at the same time, but he helps the good guy.
Okay, on verse 9, you have been as pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God. David is compared to an angel or messenger of God, in Hebrew Malach Elohim, by the wise woman of Tekoa in 2 Samuel 14:17, and by Mephibosheth in 1928. McCarter argues that this comparison is inappropriate here, since the other references refer to David as having, quote, the judicial insight of a divine being, end quote. Following the Septuagint, he removes an angel of God from the text. While Klein also follows the Septuagint, most Urdu translations and the Lucianic recension follow the Masoretic text. Tsumura writes that one phrase can have a slightly different meaning according to the speaker and the context. To Akish, David has been an acceptable and faithful servant like God's messenger. And Auld writes, since Akish gets so many things wrong, and since this narrative has possible anticipations of beginning and end of the census story, it is fair to at least ask whether there is also irony in his comparing David to a divine messenger. The only Malach Yehovah, an angel of the Lord, in Book of Two Houses, is the divine destroyer that David's conduct lets loose.
Aranri? Sorry.
Okay. And finally, on verse 10, Septuagint reads, and now be early in the morning, you and the servants of your Lord who came with you, and go to the place there where I appointed you, and do not place a pestilent thought in your heart, for you are good before me, and start early on the way, and let there be light upon you, and go. End quote.
Let
McCarter,
there be light.
Yes. McCarter writes that the Masoretic text has suffered a long haplography in this verse. He suggested the following history of the Masoretic text's corruption. Quote, 1. Bederech, on the way, became baboker, in the morning, under the influence of the earlier baboker. 2. A long haplography occurred from hashkem baboker, rise in the morning, to veheshkamtem baboker, and you, plural, rise in the morning, which may have appeared immediately beneath it in the succeeding line. And 3, the lost material was partially restored. Ve'avdi adonecha asher ba'u itach, and your Lord's servant who came with you, being added from another manuscript. Other explanations are possible, but this one at least has the advantage of identifying a mechanism for the long omission and accounting for the loss of ata, you singular, end quote. Tsumura, however, writes that the repetitive style, get up in singular and plural, can be characteristic of the narrative story, which has poetic features.
So, McCarter thinks that Bederek was then mistaken
Yes.
to be Bebocher.
Yes.
That's.
I mean, could
It's
it
kinda
be?
weird.
What did you call it? Hagiography, where like they copy from the line above it?
Haplography.
Haplography.
Yeah.
Hagiography is something else.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, haplography. Because there is
Sometimes
the bubble there and-
haplography can be hagiography, but yeah, I digress.
Oh, okay. No, because there's like in the verse, there's Baboka comes twice, so maybe it's the first one got copied to the second place, replacing Baderech.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think I agree.
Nobody cares. Sorry. And now for
Well.
the ancient. And now for the ancient Christians.
Can
Now
we
for
ban
the-
the person in chat who's making fun of people's appearances?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Now for the ancient Christians. Bede writes that the Philistines' disdain for the Hebrews signifies the attitude of pagans towards Christians. Words that celebrate David's deeds, like the church's praises of Christ's faithfulness, evoke anger and fear in each one's enemies. Like Achish, who sent David on his way after confessing his uprightness, Gentile Christians praise Christ but resist entrusting the word to powerful pagans, lest it result in persecution. That's it.
All right.
No comments then?
That's it. No.
All right, I've got
Full
some
chapter.
comments to read. Trevor Wright says, at this point, it becomes a deliberate excuse to never put the Israelites in the spotlight of ever being worthy of God. So at this point, organized chaos. And I like that there was in the last thing that Tomer just read, that somebody acknowledged that, you know what, I think this book has been corrupted.
I mean, I think all of them
Hey,
were corrupted at some point.
I know no one cares what I think, but that just reminded me, and I'm doing this just to piss you off, Tomer. But has anybody watched the new series Chaos on Netflix yet?
No.
Or am I the only one?
Sounds
It's
familiar.
pretty badass. It's not Old Testament. It's Greek mythology, but it's pretty.
Oh
cool.
yeah, the one with
Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, he plays Zeus. And it's a retelling of several of the Greek myths. It's really, really good. So
Jeff
people should watch
Goldblum
it.
plays Zeus.
Yeah,
and I think it's an excellent rendition of Zeus personally.
yeah,
That sounds.
that's not a
Zeus in a
Catholic
leisure
choice
suit.
I would have made.
Well, you should watch it.
It's pretty
And-
funny
and then
to think
decide.
of a horny Jeff Goldblum.
I think we should stop.
So no. We're gonna keep going, Tomer. We're going with this. Also, I wanted to
Peter?
note that that Homo sapiens noted that we all look like a metal band.
And I said, and I'm the drum.
Oh,
You-
that's not
you-
one.
wait, you say you're the drummer or you're the drum?
Yeah, that's what I said. Glad I don't look
I
like a
have
fake
no
metal
useful
band.
skills, so
So who's reading 30?
I'm gonna read this one,
Okay,
and you read the next one, okay?
will do.
By the time David and his men arrived in Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and against Ziklag. They had stormed Ziklag and burnt it down. They had taken the women in it captive, lowborn and highborn alike. They did not kill any, but carried them off and went their way. When David and his men came to the town and found it burnt down, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive, David and the troops with him broke into tears until they had no strength left for weeping. David's 2 wives had been taken captive, Ahinoam of LeYisra'el and Abigail, wife of Nabal, from Carmel. David was in great danger, for the troops threatened to stone him, for all the troops were embittered on account of their sons and daughters. But David sought strength in the Lord his God. David said to the priest Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, bring the ephod up to me. When Abiathar brought up the ephod to David, David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue those raiders? Will I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for you shall overtake, and you shall rescue. So David and the 600 men with him set out, and they came to the Wadi Besor, where a halt was made by those who were to be left behind. David continued this pursuit with 400 men. 200 men had halted, too faint to cross the Wadi Besor. They came upon an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. They gave him food to eat and water to drink. He was also given a piece of pressed fig cake and 2 cakes of raisins. He ate and regained his strength, for he had eaten no food and drunk no water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David asked him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? I am an Egyptian boy, he answered, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I fell ill 3 days ago. We had raided the Negev of the Kerethites, and the Negev of Judah, and the Negev of Caleb. We also burnt down Ziklag. And David said to him, can you lead me to that band? He replied, swear to me by God that you will not kill me, or deliver me into my master's hands, and I will lead you down to that band. So he led him down, and there they were, scattered all over the ground, eating and drinking, and making merry because of all the vast spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. David attacked them from before dawn until the evening of the next day. None of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and got away. David rescued everything the Amalekites had taken. David also rescued his 2 wives. Nothing of theirs was missing, young or old, sons or daughters, spoil or anything else that had been carried off. David recovered everything. David took all the flocks and herds, which the troops drove ahead of the other livestock, and they declared, this is David's spoil. When David reached the 200 men who were too faint to follow David and who had been left at the Wadi Besor, they came out to welcome David and the troops with him. David came forward with the troops and greeted them. But all the mean and churlish fellows among the men who had accompanied David spoke up. Since they did not accompany us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we seized, except that each may take his wife and children and go. David, however, spoke up. You must not do that, my brothers. In view of what the Lord has granted us, guarding us and delivering into our hands the band that attacked us, how could anyone agree with you in this matter? The share of those who remain with the baggage shall be the same as the share of those who go down to battle. They shall share alike. So from that day on, it was made a fixed rule for Israel, continuing to the present day. When David reached Ziklag, he sent some of the spoils to the elders of Judah and to his friends, saying, this is a present for you from our spoil of the enemies of the Lord. He sent the spoil to the elders in Bethel, Ramoth Negev, and Yatir, in Aroer, Sifmoth, and Eshtemoa, in Rachal, in the towns of the Yerchmaelites and in the towns of the Kenites, in Hormah, Bor Ashan, and Atach, and to those in Hebron, all the places where David and his men had roamed. The last bit is kind of written like a song for some reason. It's just a list of town names, but
Yeah.
It's kind of done using that weird staggered way of writing.
Yeah, and you can see it like in manuscripts, in Masoretic text manuscripts. You have Velasher, and how do you say this? And to the.
It's kind of and to the ones that are in.
Yeah, and to the
to
in
those
Bethel, and to the ones
are-
in. Yeah, and
Yeah.
when you see the Masoretic text, it has like a brick layering in this.
Oh, is it like one,
in
two,
pattern
one,
like
one, two?
yeah, Leasher is always in the left side and the towns are always in the right side. At least in Leningrad. I don't know if that's applicable to Aleppo.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I think I should start. Okay, on verses.
I mean, do we have any other comments on this chapter?
I was just gonna say it's very, very, very strange. Trying to understand this text, given that we're super confident about the fact that the Amalekites were Philistines,
people.
right?
Yeah.
Well, they would have been one group of them. There are lots of groups of sea people.
I'm making a joke, Lawrence. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a reference to something else, right?
Well, there's
Yeah,
still lots
some-
of groups.
One
So-
Egyptologist has said this.
Oh, a certain Egyptologist.
A certain.
Um,
Oh, no, I'm thinking
Um,
Palest or something. Okay, no.
okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I find interesting is like this is supposed to be happening around the same time as the battle, which is going to happen in the next chapter.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing it wasn't over, and the battle in the next chapter had. I don't know if it's supposed to happen, or everything in this chapter happened before the next chapter or not. But it's almost like, they go, they battle, they come back, the spoils. He gives presents to people and everything. Like,
Well,
is this
actually,
supposed to be happening while
It does
the
make
Israelites
sense
are in battle?
because if you're the raiders, and let's just assume this is a group of bandits running around in the backcountry like David, the towns all have, I guess what would be equivalent of a local lord and his knights and soldiers and whatnot, who some of them may go out hunting, raiding, serving the king, but only when war is declared and the banners are called and all the soldiers go out, and like maybe a small skeleton force is left behind, maybe not, honestly, because you're all going to war, and presumably to war against the person you are concerned about attacking you, so you don't really leave much behind in the way of reinforcements. Bad idea. But because of the whole, he can't come with us, he'll buy favor with Saul by betraying us, David has to go. David and his men head back before they're expected to. Basically, man comes home early, finds out what they had timed, because they would have timed it in such a way, ideally, that they could quickly raid the town and make it back to their own fortified cities before the men came back from the war that
they weren't worried about being followed. They just were like,
exactly. It's only
just making
because
merry in
David
the
got
open
sent home
field.
before the battle that he made it in time to stop them.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. So it makes sense that the two stories are one story actually.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Now, just think the ending is a bit weird. Where he's sending presents to all these towns, but this is in the middle of a battle where
I'm sure that had some reason to exist from the narrator's point of view, or one of the later redactors. It doesn't make any damn sense. Maybe they were just trying to fit in all their traditions willy-nilly wherever they could.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the last bit is written like a song, maybe that could have been like a quote, like maybe it could have been like an older source where David gives presents after winning some battle, and they're like, okay, let's just stick it as part of this story.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, if you're trying to bring together 6 or 7 different traditions, you want to get everybody's favorite bits in there by hook or by crook.
Minute Rice, 1954, says none of them escaped except all those guys who escaped.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it gives a number. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start my commentary. First on verses 1 through 3. Auld comments, Amalek features only once in the Book of Two Houses, in a list of neighboring peoples that David has subdued and booty from whom he dedicates to Yahweh. 2 Samuel 8:11 through 12. The extended narrative response to the mention of Amalek among the peoples raided by David from Ziklag 27:8 fleshes out both brief reports. In these David stories, as in Psalms 83, Amalek has no status among Israel's ancestral enemies as specially abhorred. To the contrary, the narrator's insistence that the Amalekites have killed no one on their Ziklag raid in verse 2 must be intended to reflect on the fact that in his raids, David, by contrast, left no one alive, 27:9, and would deal quite as ruthlessly with these Amalekite raiders, 30 verses 16 through 17.
Is it like an excuse for him not killing the 400 men that escaped? Like, oh, they weren't so bad this time. They didn't kill anyone, so we're not going to kill them all.
Yeah.
That seems to be more of a how word got out about his behavior kind of a thing. I don't know.
It is interesting that they said that the Amalekites didn't kill anyone. I mean, yeah, it makes David rescue cooler because he rescued everyone and no one was killed. But like, it also makes the enemy look good. No,
It does. It does.
maybe it makes it look good to us, but maybe not.
I mean, he slaughtered everybody, women, children, and
Yeah,
it's yet another example of, gee, this guy after God's own heart really is such a dirtbag. Apparently, everybody, all the idol worshiping bastards around, were much more considerate and humane and, virtuous and all that jazz.
God wants you to kill them all. That's how he rolls.
I mean, it could have been portrayed as like worse, right? Instead of killing them, they took them for their own benefit.
That's
them for marriage.
That's a sign of that's just
Yeah,
that's just selfish.
Yeah,
You're gonna keep any of that stuff for yourself.
They took the women for marriage. As who was it? Who said that?
P-Town.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. On verse 6.
I'll just say before you continue, Lawrence, that to date, there is no information at all that we can glean outside of the Bible for in the existence of the Amalekites. They're just
Sure. There's a great section in Van Setter's book on, was it Abraham? Yeah, on Abraham, that was essentially like these are just very relativistic, like not even tribal terms, like cultural terms maybe, but it's very fuzzy, like nothing outside of it. And then we kind of it's a similar thing happened with Canaan, right? Because like it's not like if you would have went to ancient Canaan, people would have been like, oh yeah, we're Canaanite. No, it's just about the region, and then like later scholars kind of took it as like one conglomerate thing. But yeah, it's the same issue there.
Okay, on verse 6, Klein comments, David's distress was not so much over his own problems as it was over the bitterness of his soldiers. In their grief, compare 2 Kings 4:27, or anger, compare 2 Samuel 17:8, over their children, perhaps and their wives also, they wanted to stone David. Such an assassination would seem to have legal connotations, as if they wanted to execute their leader for failing to provide proper protection. Undeterred by his own grief or the rebellion of his troops, David restored to Yahweh for strength and courage. Compare 2 Chronicles 15:8.
That just sounds like a smart leader who's like, hey, you're pissed. Valid. Let's go knock some heads together and get them back if we can.
Yeah, it's not clear if he was actually in great danger or the fact that people were saying things about him and were upset made him feel unsafe, and therefore sought strength in the Lord is enough to help him.
I mean, if all your men are about ready to kill you, you are in danger, because power resides where men believe it resides. It's a shadow on the wall.
On verse 8, Auld comments, in contrast to Saul's failure to elicit a response from Yahweh by any means in 28 verses 6 and 15, David's inquiry of Yahweh is answered, and his hopes are affirmed in the strongest terms. To heighten this contrast, the linguistic structure of the oracle, hasek tasig vehatzel tatzil, two verbs without object or further specification, each emphasized by the infinitive absolute, resembles the structure of Saul's unusual blessing in 26:25.
Yeah, it's interesting. This contradicts the idea from earlier where it's like, oh, if you ask two questions, you'll only get one answer. Because over here, he asks two questions and he gets a full answer.
Now in verse 10, 200 of them were too exhausted to cross the valley. Hebrew for too exhausted is pigru, from the root pe gimel resh. The word peger generally means corpse. Thus, Ibn Kaspi writes, they made themselves like dead corpses, for they did not want to pass because their heart dropped, i.e. they were scared, end quote. Likewise, Auld renders were too dead to cross. Kimchi takes the root to mean too exhausted, based on the Aramaic cognate demefagri in Talmud Shabbat 129b. This meaning is attested by Vulgate and is favored by most modern commentators. Septuagint reads 200 who stayed, reading yashvu instead of pigru. Targum reads 200 men who refrained from crossing. Peshitta and the Lucenic recension add that the 200 stayed behind to protect their baggage, as is stated in verse 24, a reading which Kara favors. On verse 14, Negev of the Kerethites, McCarter comments, the Kerethites, in Hebrew Hakirati, were identical to, or at least closely associated with the Philistines. Compare Ezekiel 25:16 and Zephaniah 2:5. And in view of age and origins of the latter, we are justified in relating Kerethite to Cretan. The Cretan Negev, then, was that part of the southern desert controlled by the Philistines, or perhaps a subdivision of it in the vicinity of Tsiklag. The presence later on in King David's army of a contingent of Kerethites who showed a particular loyalty that continued into Solomon's reign, suggests that David won their allegiance decisively in his days at Tsiklag. Compare 2 Samuel 8:18, 15:18, and 1 Kings 1 verses 38 and 44.
That's fair. There is definitely mentions of David during his, let's say, his Robin Hooding years, making bonds with people who remained very loyal to him. He did not really return the favor, but, at least not in all cases. But in some sense, I can see these men being tired. If you think about it, they march to war. They get stopped and sent back right away. So they've already marched twice as far, because normally, you get everyone together and try and arrange it so you get a little bit of a rest before you go right into battle. They're just sent straight back, and then they're marching again another however far to catch up with these guys who are, running off with their families and drinking and stuff, and at least have camels. So yeah, it's, if they were not as strong, they're already overtaxed, and the others will be able to move much faster without the weight of the baggage. So it does make some practical sense.
Yeah, it sounds like something they added, like, as part of the story, just to show his military strategy thinking, where he's like, I've got 600 men, I will go faster if I get all the weakest men behind, give them something to do, look after the baggage, let's go, we can overtake them. And then also, I'm guessing this is also supposed to be some sort of etiology of where the idea that when you go to war, the ones who remain behind to guard the baggage are given the same amount of spoil as everyone else.
Yeah, fair treatment, David, sets a precedent. This allows us to justify it forever because, if our extra specially gaudy genocidal king did a good thing, we have to keep doing that good thing forever. And okay.
And I'm guessing scribes would have been part of the contingent of the army that were left behind, so it would be in their interest to to get the same amount of spoils.
I could see that. I could see that.
Okay, on verse 15, swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master. Bar-Efrat comments, the slave fears that David might kill him because he participated in the raid of Ziklag. The request not to be handed over to his master indicates the Amalekite's attitude towards the slave, and the slave's fear of him. The background for the slave's demands is the legal situation in the ancient Near East, where it is required to hand over a slave to his masters. Only the Israelite law opposes this in Deuteronomy 23, verses 16 and 17. And considering that the slave is a property, the master can do anything to him. It is not told that David swore to the slave, but it is clear that he did.
Right. 'Cause the next
Slaves
thing,
in the Bible? What?
Well,
Yeah.
in fairness, even according
They
to the
treat him
local
well,
law,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure if David kills his master, he gets to keep the slave. So that doesn't count as sending him back.
he didn't break the rule because he just killed the master instead.
And stole him. Yeah, exactly.
No, but actually, it was like Thomas said, Israelite law, at least at some point, commanded you not to return slaves to foreigners. Only escaped slaves from other Israelites do you return.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and in fairness, he was going to lead this military force to attack his master. So presumably if his master lived and got his hands on him, that doesn't go well.
Yeah, I don't know if this shows that the Amalekites' outlook on slavery. It could just be this specific master who left him to die in a field for getting sick, you know.
A slave owner was a douche?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a polemic against the Amalekite. Oh, the Amalekites treated their slaves so badly. I think necessarily. Probably was.
The Jews were so much better to their slaves. They didn't even
They were-
beat them to death.
Okay, on verse 17, from dusk until the evening of the next day. Hebrew for dusk is neshif. The root nun shin pei means to blow, and so neshif could mean the time when the wind blows, according to Bar-Efrat, or the time of a particular wind, according to Halot. The word can denote either twilight, as we see in Isaiah 5:11 and Proverbs 7:9, followed by Vulgate, Targum, Kara, and Kimchi, or the first light of dawn, according to Psalms 119-147, Job 7:4, followed by Peshita, Ditrani, McCarter, Klein, and the Bar-Efrat. Tsumura notes that although the usual English translation, until the evening of the next day, found in NRSV, NIV, and JPS, would give the impression that the battle lasted at least one full day, the term mochora, the morrow, would refer to after sunset, since a new day begins at sunset. He concludes that the battle most probably lasted from dawn to after sunset of the same day in modern terms. Septuagint reads, from morning star till late at night. On verse 22, because they did not go out with us. Hebrew Bible reads, they did not go out with me, imi. The Masoretic text reading is attested by Targum. Kara, Ditrani, and Bar-Efrat wrote that each one of the evil men said this. Most early translations and several Hebrew manuscripts read us, imanu, a reading favored by most modern commentators. On verse 25, Klein writes that David performs the judicial functions of a king, just as he had previously shown king-like leadership in war, as we see in 18:7, 21:12, which is 11 in the Old Testament. He writes, quote, since this was a custom honored in Israel, the point of view of the narrator may be from a time when David had become king of both Judah and Israel. The etiological character of this information is shown by the notice that this custom persisted until this day, end quote. On verse 26, he sent some of the plunder to the elders of Judah. Bar-Efrat notes that the word for to his friends, lere'ehu, and the phrase where he roamed there, asher hitalech sham, in verse 31, indicate David's intentions by sending some of the spoil to Judah's elders. He writes, quote, since they, at the time when David escaped from Saul, were, quote, doing favors to him, he made them a favor from the spoil, end quote, according to Kimchi, i.e., his goal was to reward his friends for helping him. Moreover, quote, it was wisdom from David at that time, end quote, according to Ibn Kaspi, i.e., in that way, David hoped to get support in the future from the elders of Judah, end quote. Tsumura quotes from C.H. Gordon and G.A. Rendsburg, quote, the wisdom, diplomacy, and generosity of David are again shown in that he sent a share of the booty to the elders of Judah, his own tribe, for it was these elders that some day were to make him king, before the other tribes of Israel would accept his sovereignty, end quote. And finally, 27 through 31, Auld comments, the list is reminiscent of the topographical chapters in Joshua, in two respects. It is only in Joshua 17:16 that we find another instance of la asher vela asher, to those in and to those in, and several of the names appear in the list of Judah's cities in Joshua 15 and Simeon's in Joshua 19, and the Levitical cities from both in Joshua 21 and 1 Chronicles 6. Choma precedes Ziklag in Joshua 15:30-31 and 19:4-5, and Ethel, though not the unique Atach, appears immediately before Ashan in Joshua 15:42 and 19:7. Kenites and Yerachmeelites feature here among David's beneficiaries, 30:29 in the Masoretic text, when asked by Achish about his raiding activities. David has claimed them among his victims in 27:10. The Kenites were good neighbors of Judah to the south and are well spoken of wherever they are mentioned in the books from Exodus to 1 Samuel. And that's it from a commentary. But we have the the Christians. Gregory the Great writes that David's encounter with the Egyptian servant is interpreted allegorically as the conversion of an outcast who is renewed by Christ. And Bede writes that or as the experience of a person who escapes away from heretics to the church.
You know what's funny about Gregory the Great? He seems to dodge absolutely everything. So I do cite him a couple times in my upcoming video, but he's like when it comes to like Isaiah 40:22, he completely dodges like the question and wants to talk about the earth instead instead of the heavens. But the thing is, when push comes to shove, he was still like in the rest of his homily, he still, like, when it comes to like what is holding the earth up, he tries to be a physicist, and he's like, well, you know what? If there's nothing holding the earth up, then the earth would just fall right into the void. If it was water under the earth, it would sink. And if it was on pillars or like on anything else solid, it would have to be held up by something. So either way, the God's got the whole world in his hands. So he really like goes around every single thing.
Yeah.
Well, God doesn't hold his own globe. What's it called again? Snow globe up. It's like, oh, this is too heavy. Let me put them on this little table.
Intelligent gravity.
Then the table would fall.
Sorry, intelligent falling.
It's resting on pillars.
It would
Don't be
it would
silly.
fall.
You
The
all
pillars
know
would
it's
fall.
turtles all the way down. You all know this.
Turtle table.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed at how the Christians managed to squeeze Jesus into everything.
Like a toothpaste.
Yeah. Just, and
I
I
don't
would
know.
do an argument with a Muslim, because I wasn't being raised by Mormons who see Jesus as somebody who stands next to God. You know, they saw Jesus as God's son, and that's all the way they always depicted them. And I hadn't really gotten at that point in my life into a lot of religious arguments, so I just thought that's how everybody viewed it. That's the way the Bible describes him, right? Jesus always only ever says that God is someone else, somewhere else, who knows things Jesus doesn't know. So that means that Jesus cannot be an avatar of God. He cannot be God in the flesh. And Jesus knows that. He admits that over and over again. When he says, before Abraham, I am, that just means he's a created being before Abraham.
Or he's saying that I am, the name of God,
Mhm.
Yeah.
was before Abraham. He's not saying I am. He's just saying I am. That's the
Yeah.
name of God. I am.
Yeah, and
The
I am
I
was
am
another
was before.
interpretation beyond that, in which in none of these cases does Jesus ever say that he is the physical manifestation of God. I mean,
Right.
there's when Christians always bring me up, this passage in John where Jesus says that
Those who
I
have
and
seen
the Father
Father.
are one. But then later in the same book, Jesus is praying to God saying, hey, can my disciples be one with you just like I'm one with you? Which means that Jesus is not one with God the way that the Christian said he was, right?
Yeah, the issue really comes about when I go over this in all my videos on the Trinity, but the issue is really like, well, like if Jesus was the one that suffered and died, how could that be a redemptive act? What is the redemptive power of a created being suffering and dying for everybody?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
Maybe isn't
there's
there,
quite a
like,
bit of
his only
theological issues
begotten
that come up
son?
that led to the development of the
Yeah.
Trinity.
Right. Is it possible that what's the latest gospel that we understand?
The latest one would be John, yeah.
John is the
Oh.
last,
And is
the
John
least.
more leaning
Maybe
towards divinity? Oh, okay.
Yeah. John is very
definitely.
much like exalted Jesus. That's why he always uses phrases like "I am the way, the truth, and the life," stuff like that.
I have had even
a
Protestant
development.
quasi-evangelical ministers admit to me that John is more theological than biographical. You are
Yeah.
a suck.
And so that this argument that I get into with this Muslim, he says that Christians don't worship Jesus, or excuse me, they don't worship God. They worship Jesus. And I was trying as God, and I tried to argue against him at that one point, but then I realized, well, he was right. There was a meeting a few years ago where a number of imams and rabbis agreed that they worship the same God, but that Christians worship a different one because they literally do worship Jesus, and they think that Jesus is God. They don't think of Yahweh, Jehovah as. And I'm wondering when there's a cloud hanging over everybody, and John the Baptist has just baptized Jesus, and then the cloud starts talking and says, "This is my son, in whom I am very proud." You've got Clark Kent and Superman in the same room at the same time. What the hell, you know?
Well, you see, this is what we call a paradox. And obviously, the 587 Superman broke into the 616 world to create a illusion that would allow him to maintain his identity. And honestly, I don't know why we're expecting, three different universe Jesus God combos to do the same thing, because it's just not the same. It's not the same origin. They may have the same canon events, but the universe is different, and we have to account for that.
I mean, ultimately, it's still all the God of Abraham.
Okay, all right.
And
so
he's
we're
still a
ready to
wanker.
jump into.
I mean, like Judaism, for example, would view Christianity as being more akin to idol worship. And for that reason, like Jews are permitted to either go in or even to pray in a mosque, but not in a church.
I remember when I was growing up.
Interesting.
When I was a little kid, my mom told me that the Jews didn't believe in Jesus. And I asked, well, why not? And she's like, well, who knows? Who cares? I'm like, have you ever thought about asking a Jewish person why they don't? Because maybe somebody else knows something you don't know. Wouldn't it be a good idea to ask them? But the people all around me in my world, I mean, they would tell me what other people believe, but they wouldn't have those other people say that. They're just they'll make proclamations about what those other people believe, but they don't invite them to the conversation to find out.
Historically, Christians haven't really liked the answers Jews give them when they ask questions.
Yeah, so I would get accused. When they find out that my family's Mormon, they would start telling me all these weird things that Mormons believe. And granted, these Mormons do believe weird things, but not the same weird things that these people are telling me. So I'm saying, well, hey, you want to come in and tell my mom that she believes all these things? And then they refuse. And I think the reason they refuse is because they don't want to be corrected. They don't want my family to say, no, that is not what we believe. We believe this. And it's fine if you disagree with what they actually said. But otherwise, if you're making a proclamation about what they believe and you don't want to hear what they believe, well, then you're more interested in your straw man than you are in the reality.
So I think that Jewish responses to Christianity really set very sharply into view just why the messianic movement is so problematic, which is like the weirdest amalgamation of cultural appropriation and religion on the planet.
It's
as far as
creepy.
I can tell. Well,
It's
maybe not the
super
weirdest, but
creepy.
it's
There's a
pretty
difference
weird.
between an ethnic Jewish person or a religious Jewish person converting to Christianity, and now I'm a Christian, and like maybe I want to keep some Jewish things, and they could even like look at the New Testament and be like, yeah, if you're Jewish, then you still have to keep the Jewish law. If you're not Jewish, you only have to believe in Jesus or whatever. Like they could see that, but like the whole messianic movement. And also Jews for Jesus, which I think one is Baptist, one is evangelical. I don't
it's
remember.
more or less the same
Jews for
thing.
Jesus was started by a Baptist minister, I think.
Oh, that's Baptist. Okay, so Jews for Jesus is Baptist, and
Cult.
Messianic Judaism is
Jews
evangelical.
for Jesus is Baptist.
Is older.
It was a cult started by a Baptist to try and reach out to Jews and manipulate them into becoming Christians, and it's gone about as well as Martin Luther's attempt to do the same thing. It's just the mental contortions.
Yeah, I live around the corner from a whole like complex that was built in Victorian times. It's not there anymore. That was built by the British Association for the Conversion of Jews or whatever it was called. Like it was, the churches were publicly doing this stuff, and then when it became socially unacceptable, I guess, to be so proud of it, they started making more quiet organizations, I guess.
Matt White says Aaron just showed what he can do that theists cannot. Theists cannot admit. They were wrong about something. Yeah. It happens. In the last video I did, I said that Skara Brae was in Ireland and it was in Scotland, and it's amazing how many people corrected me on that in the comments. I can't get away with saying something wrong.
That's one of the big differences between like atheist and theist audiences as well. Like we're happy to correct someone because we know that they want to be corrected.
Well, there's the other thing in that when you admit the mistake and you stopped being wrong at that point.
But a lot of Christians feel like if you admit you were wrong about one thing, then you're wrong about everything, and everything you said has to be thrown out, which is silly. But that's the way they're raised. And like,
well, that's why the admission earlier today that some portion of the Bible is corrupted. That's why that's important.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's only when you're claiming perfect knowledge, the perfect word of the perfect God, that you get an issue where if anything is just slightly awry, you have to burn everything. That's not the way grown-ups deal with knowledge in any other area of life. But magic God is less than perfectly magic, end of everything. Yeah. And like I made the comparison of the superheroes, and I mixed up the Marvel multiverse with the DC characters, mea culpa. But genuinely, I have maintained for a long time that listening to theologians debate is exactly the same as listening to warring nerds at Comic-Con. It's
I wouldn't agree. I think Comic-Con is so much more interesting.
It's so interesting. Yeah, like I love reading books on Christology and just seeing those guys go at each other. It's so great.
But it's the same reasoning. It's the same attitudes. It's literally, you just change a few names. He would never do that. Well, he did, but that was a special circumstance. Well, then he would. It's the same arguments. It's the same argument.
It's an internal critique, Lilith. Sorry, I've been watching way too many inspiring philosophy videos over the last couple
Yay!
You've seen 2. That was too many. Okay, Matt White says, yes. Aaron just showed. Oh no, sorry, I've read that one. Ferthausen offers $10 and says nothing to say, so quote a song. Wednesday 13, I'll put my hands together. Now hold them up to the sky, but there's no one to save me. Yeah, because I know God is a lie. Well, thank you for that thought.
I like it.
All right. Are we ready to jump into the last chapter of this
Yeah.
book?
It's not really though.
What?
Well, it's the last chapter of First Samuel.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
we
But
have,
what about
we should probably
Second
talk
Samuel?
well,
Can
that's,
we talk
that's
about the
Samuel book
reasoning?
2, the sequel.
Is it part of the same, Christian editorial process that gave us the verse numbers and chapters?
Yeah.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
I know that the Septuagint split it into 2 books,
Oh.
and then the Christians
did.
took the
So it's even
took that later on. Yeah.
I think
Mm.
Langton was the one who divided into chapters.
Lang-
Stephen Langton.
Does
Yeah,
does
Stephen
the
Langton
Septuagint
from the
actually
12.
call it?
From Deeple.
Well,
I
I
use the
know it
Septuagint
divides
actually-
the books, right? But
Yeah,
They gave
Stephen
us
Langton.
chapter numbers.
it
and
would
yeah,
Oh,
be,
you
it
got
would
yours
be,
out. They're not. They're
it'd be
1
kingdoms.
through 4 reigns,
yeah,
aren't
yeah,
they?
it's the kingdoms. Yeah,
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah, but
Yeah.
Basileon, yeah, it's the kingdoms.
So are we ready to jump into this next chapter?
Sure.
I think
Okay.
we should continue discussing the. Never mind. No one cares.
Okay,
what I
what
have
would
to
you
say.
like to continue?
No, I'm fine.
Nope.
Sorry.
You're respected over here. Don't act like that.
I am just being obnoxious. So please
All right, we'll get
just
into
ignore it.
chapter 31. Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell on the Mount Gilboa. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around Saul, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." But his armor-bearer was terrified and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons, and the armor-bearer and all his men died together that same day. When the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and that Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on the Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off his armor, and they sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idols and among the people. They put his armor on the temple of the Ashereths and fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard that what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men marched through the night to Bethshan. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days. The end.
Our First Samuel.
To be continued. ...
Question mark.
Yeah, so this is the first account of Saul's death. That he falls on his own sword. Remember that
There
for
is
next
just-
time.
Yeah.
Well,
there
so
are
yeah,
three-
When I was a kid. No, I was just gonna say when I was a kid, I used to spend some time imagining what this looked like. People trying to set their sword up to drop themselves on it effectively to kill them. So
It's, there's like a Japanese version that they would have done quite often if not to be captured.
Seppuku, where you
No,
Yeah,
seppuku
seppuku.
something.
Seppuku, yeah.
seppuku. Yeah.
but do they
pronunciation.
actually fall? on
I
their
think
No,
it might be an
that
expression
It's
to
typical.
fall upon your sword.
It is
Yeah,
an
he
expression,
could've
yes,
just,
and
you know.
and that's my point. But like
Like-
when I was a kid, I was like,
Mm.
how does this work?
I know you sort of envision them trying to stand the sword up and then throw themselves on it, as opposed to just like
Totally, yeah.
See,
I
that makes
was-
sense
I mean,
too,
I was
though.
like-
Like I could
You're
totally
gonna
see someone
use-
doing that.
You're gonna use your body weight to impel yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that that you're falling on the ground or whatnot. I
Yeah.
guess.
And then Minute Rice, 1954, says, I'm looking forward to 2 Samuel, where Samuel was recast as the aptly named Sir not appearing in this book.
Yeah, I mean, considering that this book was originally one book, like First and Second Samuel. Yeah.
I mean, I presume that this may have just been a case of two different scrolls because size, but yeah, I have no idea why the second
Yes.
half is named Samuel. Even his ghost doesn't appear there.
So this isn't Revenge of the Undead
Is-
Samuel?
It's more. I think it's more because Samuel is like a predominant figure of like the first half. So like,
I think it's
an
also
influence of
traditionally
Samuel
he
as well.
wrote
Is
it,
the
right?
rabbinic tradition who is the author of these books in the rabbinic
Accor-
tradition?
well,
is it Jeremiah?
No, it's Samuel.
No, it's those-
For the first
Yeah,
half
Gad
until
and,
I wanted to say that, but you know, you can't let me. You can't,
Sorry.
you just can't.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So the first half, at least until 1 Samuel 25, is Samuel, and then the rest of it was written by Gad and Nathan.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yes, I remember.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
did
like his
Jeremiah write?
assistant
He wrote
scribes.
stuff, didn't he?
Jeremiah
wrote-
has his own book.
Lamentations.
No, no, but he wrote other
Lamentations.
stuff.
Oh,
Lamentations.
I've heard
Is,
that-
is that I
Samuel-
thought they attributed some of the Deuteronomistic history to Jeremiah, didn't they?
I don't remember that.
Be very late now.
Who wrote Kings?
Oh,
Hmm.
I think that
Oh,
was
didn't he write
actually.
King-
hold on, was that-
Ezra?
No.
Really? I gotta.
No, Ezra and
I
Nehemiah.
don't remember
would have
the-
written
I don't
Ezra.
remember
Oh,
the-
Jeremiah.
actually put that
Jeremiah,
down.
Jeremiah, according to the Bava Batra 15a.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, he wrote.
Did he
wrote
write?
Yeah,
Kings,
okay,
didn't he?
okay, gotcha.
Ah,
Yeah,
And
he-
probably because
yeah, that makes sense.
you know, it's huge portions of Kings are repeated in the book of Jeremiah, or vice versa. But anyways,
Just to be clear, we're not actually saying
well, huge
Jeremiah
portions
wrote
of Kings are also repeated in Isaiah too. But
Yeah, the traditions are always very interesting.
Yeah, like Moses writing his own
anyways,
death
I'm-
with his tears.
yeah,
Samuel
Um,
writing his own death. He's like, oh, not again.
Okay.
Ah.
So Lawrence already noted that there is another version in the next chapter, but there is also First Chronicles 10, and I made some introduction regarding this. So First Chronicles 10
Oh.
verses 1 through 12 records the same event with several alterations, as we'll see later. This led scholars ever since Noth to see a dependence between 1 Samuel 31 and 1 Chronicles 10. For example, Tsumura notes that Shaul Zalewski took the chronicler's negative evaluation of Saul in 1 Chronicles 10, 13-14 to be, quote, properly understood against the background of Saul's sins in the books of Samuel, end quote. McCarter, however, writes, quote, the text of the synoptic passage in 1 Chronicles 10 seems to hark back to a shorter, more primitive version of the account at many points, end quote. Tsumura notes that Craig Y.S. Ho compared the two passages in detail and suggested that, quote, the chronicler did not seem to know any form of 1 Samuel 31 that we have, end quote. Auld also favors Ho's opinion and writes that, quote, where it is briefer, the version in Chronicles is prior. Some of the clauses in Samuel belong together as part of the deliberate rewriting of the report, end quote.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start on verse 3. The archers. Hebrew Bible reads, Hamorim anashim bakashet. Literally, the archers, men with the bow. This reading is reflected in the Septuagint, but 1 Chronicles 10:3 reads, Hamorim bakeshet. the archers with the bow. Titrani suggested amending the text to Anashim Hamorim Bakeshet, men the archers with the bow. McCarter and Klein followed First Chronicles, with McCarter calling the both Masoretic text and Septuagint as a conflation of variants. Tsumura, however, writes that the indefinite noun anashim, men, seems to be the subject of the verb vayimtseuhu, they found him, as in Genesis 37:15, vayimtseuhu ish, a man found him, and the clause is to be understood as passive in meaning. Targum reads, the archers found him, men who were skilled at bending the bow. Van Stardaine Salman writes that the addition skilled, amanin, is probably inspired by the Hebrew homonym hamorim, teacher.
Can I say something about verse 2?
Yes.
Or does nobody care? Oh, wow. Thank you, Tomer. That's generous of you. I just want to point out that I've always found it kind of quite interesting that the verb used to describe the pursuit of the Philistines of the Israelites is davak. It's the Hiphil form, which is generally a causative, but it's the same root as the word that appears in Genesis chapter 2. I don't remember the verse numbers, but the in the song that the man sings to the woman, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. It then says, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. It's the same root there. The clinging, the pursuing. I don't know. I've always found the connection kind of interesting, and I do wonder if we are missing some of the sense of that word in the Genesis 2 passage that has to do with pursuit and conquest.
That's interesting, because oddly enough, I mean, you have that in the English word cleave, where you have the two meanings which are diametrically opposed, to cling to and to cleave in half.
Yeah.
You know, with your butcher's cleaver,
true.
you're not putting the pig back together. So it's
I just like that word, cleave.
Yeah,
it's a great word.
It's very useful.
It's better than
very
cling,
interesting.
in my opinion. But yeah.
Agreed.
I think it's one of those words that like have two meanings that are opposites of each other.
Mm.
Where it means
And
to
I'm wondering
cling
if
together
that's
or to divide.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's also reflected in the Hebrew here. Although, I mean, it would be unusual that they would both have words, you know, with these kind of opposite meanings in this same place in the grammar. But I mean, you know, weirder things have happened in the evolution of language. So,
Okay, on that same verse, on verse 3, they wounded him critically. Hebrew Bible reads, Vayachel me'od mehamorim, and he yachel greatly from the archers. The exact meaning of the verb vayachel is unclear. Septuagint reads, and he was wounded in the abdomen, reading vayachel from the root chet lamed hey, to be sick or be wounded. This meaning is attested by Josephus in Antiquities 6370, Vulgate, and is supported by Bar-Efrat and McCarter. However, Targum and Peshitta read yechal from the root chet yud lamed, from the root chet yud lamed, to be afraid, i.e., Saul was greatly afraid of the archers. This reading is favored by several traditionals like Kara, Kimchi, and Ditrani, and by Klein and Tsumura. Van Stardaine Solman notes that the usage of Chet Yud Lamed is remarkable, since it is confined to poetry or elevated prose, according to Driver.
It's that's the root that's also suggested by Halot for this word too.
On verse 4, Saul took his own sword and fell on it. Klein comments, no ethical evaluation of Saul's attempted suicide is offered. A grievously wounded Abimelech had once asked his weapon bearer to kill him lest people despise him for being killed by a woman, Judges 9:54. And Samson too chose suicide as a way to take vengeance on the Philistines by bringing the house down on them in Judges 16:30. Saul apparently wanted to deprive the Philistines of the chance to kill him and of the chance to ridicule or torture him. Yahweh had once made sport of the Egyptians in Exodus 10:2 and 1 Samuel 6:6, but the Philistines would not be allowed to turn the tables on Yahweh's anointed. Torture is possibly suggested by the way the men of Gibeah made sport, quote unquote, of the Levite's concubine by raping her all night long in Judges 19:25. On verse 6, there are 3 versions of this verse. The first, the Masoretic text reading, found also in Vulgate, Targum, Peshitta, and the Lysianic recension. The second, the Septuagint reading, which omits all his men. And the third, 1 Chronicles 10:6, which reads, Saul and his 3 sons and his entire house died together. McCarter prefers the Septuagint reading and writes that 1 Chronicles represents an early reading which lacked the expansions and his weapon bearer and on that day, but itself expands together. He suggests that, quote, a primitive form of the present verse, not reconstructible from the evidence of 1 Samuel 31 alone, may have been, so Saul and his 3 sons died together, end quote. Klein also favors the Septuagint, but suggests that the Masoretic text's gloss was based on the reading of all his house in 1 Chronicles 10. Tsumura notes that Craig Y.S. Ho preferred the version of 1 Chronicles, taking, quote, all his household, end quote, as equivalent to Saul and his 3 sons, since only Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua, 1 Samuel 14:49, are mentioned as Saul's sons. Thus, quote, Ho takes Saul's household list as a possible source of 1 Chronicles, end quote. Tsumura, however, writes, quote, the available evidence does not allow us to make a final decision about the dependence of 1 Chronicles 10:6 on our text. It is always possible that the author of Chronicles had access to other information, end quote.
I
Well,
do
he
love.
definitely had access to other information, but at the same time, it's I'm pretty sure it's generally well accepted that the chronicler used the Deuteronomistic history as a source.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, he definitely had others,
There's no
right? 'Cause
question of that.
there's like the whole thing in even just what was it? Yeah, about who the guy who killed
Well-
Goliath, right? Al-Hanan, right? Like so
I-
he had other
Elhanan.
he had other sources,
If
but
you look-
like he's go ahead.
And this is an exercise that I used to actually walk some of my undergraduate students through. But if you sit down and you read Solomon's speech at the temple dedication in First Kings, I don't remember the chapter number offhand, and then if you compare that to the version in First Chronicles, I mean, it's obvious that the chronicler is just repeating the contents of the speech in First King in the Deuteronomistic history, but then he's got all sorts of places where he adds to what Solomon says. It's patently
Well,
obvious.
I mean, the earlier part of Solomon's reign is clearly bound up in sort of making him the keystone of everything they attributed to David, the favor of God and everything else.
Mhm.
I was going to say earlier in your commentary, Tomer, that the idea that, the king would kill himself rather than be tortured. And let's face it, often those conquered might be raped as a sign of dominance. I just find it interesting, the admission in the story, which is borne out by history, that men frequently would rather, and very frequently do, rather take their own lives than endure the tortures that they visit upon women as a matter of course.
Okay, on verse 7, the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan. 1 Chronicles 10:7 reads, the Israelites who were in the valley. McCarter proposed that who were on the other side of the valley in 1 Samuel 31 is original, but and those across the Jordan is, quote, unquestionably expansive, end quote. He notes the Alexandrinus reading, who were on the other side of the Jordan, which he takes to be a result from haplography in a Greek manuscript tradition, which originally had the longer reading of Masoretic text and the Septuagint. On verse 9, they cut off his head and stripped off his armor. 1 Chronicles 10:9 changes the order. They stripped him and carried off his head and his armor. Septuagint does not mention a beheading. McCarter takes the mention of the beheading to be secondary because of, quote, its variety of form and location, end quote, in all versions. He argued that the verses that follow do not assume that Saul was beheaded. While this meaning is preferred by Auld, Tsumura notes Williamson's opinion that the difference between 1 Chronicles 10:10 and the text is due to the difference in perspectives. 1 Samuel is about the, quote, the Philistines' treatment of Saul's body, end quote, while 1 Chronicles is more concerned with, quote, the fate of his head, end quote.
Yeah, there does seem to be. I thought there was a later part in the next book where they talk about their attempt to get the head back after the desecration of the bodies.
Yeah.
Since they buried the bodies, but presumably the was, without heads.
Yeah. We say that. I'll mention it later. Okay, so on that same verse, the temple of their idols. Hebrew Bible reads, Bet Atzabehem. The word Atzabehem is derived from Atzav, which denotes an idol, according to BDB Dictionary, Halad, and modern commentators. Bar-Efrat writes that Atzabim is a pejorative of idols, which emphasizes that they were crafted, utzvu, by people, as we see in Psalms 1-5:15, quote, the idols of the nations, Atzabea Goim, are silver and gold, the work of men's hands, end quote. 1 Chronicles 10:9 and Septuagint read their idols, without temple.
I
Well,
wonder.
I mean, house of the idols means temple.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of this polemic has to do with attempting to reduce the much more common like ancient Near Eastern tradition worldview, in which a temple house is literally the residence on earth for the gods. By just calling this the house of the idols, the objects. I mean, they all had them, right? They all had the icons and the visual representations of the gods. But it was understood that these were not the gods themselves. This was a way of manifesting the presence of the gods on earth.
Yeah.
I wonder if it comes from the the development of language, right? So we're using this word for building or place or whatnot, and then we think of this word as meaning by itself house. So now that we're calling this the house of God, maybe that already that made you think of, okay, so maybe this is the house as in like my house, the living space of the gods, as opposed to.
Do you think it's going in the other direction?
I think it's a pretty good indication of where.
Oh, you mean the words?
Redactors and sources would come in. I mean, if you think about it, the Deuteronomistic source, presuming the cult that raised Josiah and all that, they were trying to centralize worship in the temple, and therefore wanted to promote the idea of the temple is the house of God, and you can only properly worship God at the temple. Stop fiddling around at all your high places; they're idols, and you're bad. Whereas the rebirth of God necessitated by the Exodus and, the priestly sources trying to put together their religion when they returned, necessitated this idea that God used the temple but was not bound to it in that same way that the sort of the more archaic localized deities idea was, because they had expanded their God to go with them. So it's interesting. Different redactors at different stages will lean one way and one will lean the other, I think, probably based on their ideological and political goals.
I mean, it is really interesting, right? That I think if I remember correctly, they did keep did they keep the robe of Samuel, or was that what he was buried in?
Um,
The only robe I know
Okay.
is Elijah's robe that falls to Elisha. Yeah, I'm using the English words. It's easier.
no, it says that they stripped his armor. I mean, kelav, which can also mean weapons, and it just says that they stuck they impaled his body at the wall of Bethshan. But
No,
let me see.
I was mentioning Samuel.
Oh, sorry. No, it doesn't say that, but I've noted previously that some like traditional commentators wrote that he was buried with it.
Okay, gotcha. Um, yeah, because in the whole Witch of Endor story, right, they had uh that be like a recognizing factor, but so it is interesting that they are taking the armor and putting it up in the temple of a goddess. So yeah, that is quite interesting.
Hmm.
Maybe it speaks to ancestral worship, I guess, but
And
also at the same time to what Kip was saying, polemicizing, because it's not like in the temple of God himself. It's in this house for the idols.
but they had taken the trophies and, paraded it in front of their gods and kings, as you do.
Okay, on verse 10, the temple of the Ashtoreths. In Hebrew, it's Bet Ashtarot. The word Ashtarot is the plural of Ashtoret, a major Canaanite goddess, which, according to Bar-Efrat, was probably the goddess of love and fertility. Most commentators, following the Septuagint, amend the text to read the temple of Ashtoret, with Klein writing that the narrator may be using the plural divine name to show disdain for the place where the Philistines put Saul's weapons. Tsumura, however, writes that grammatically, plural names are attested in such divine names as Baalim, Baals, and Garim, mountains, in the Ugaritic pantheon list, and Ilim Ne'emam, good gods, in the Ugaritic myth and ritual, quote-unquote. Auld notes that nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible are Philistines said to worship Ashtaroth. 1 Chronicles 10:10 reads, the temple of their gods.
So the SBL Study Bible says that that it probably refers to a goddess whose name was Antit. But yeah, on the whole like Baalim thing, yeah, this kind of speaks to the cultic practices. So we have the same god manifesting in different ways in different places, but it's still all under the same banner. So this would be well, either this would be one of them, or this would be, well, I guess you have to put his stuff in one of them, or it could be like or it could be one place that housed many of these.
When Aaron read it, I don't know which translation you're using, but it sounded like you said Asheroth, like Asherah, rather than Ashtaroth. Aaron, can you check the version you're reading from, verse 10?
Yeah, I was reading the. I think I just closed it. I was reading from the New Revised Standard Anglicized
NRSV.
Updated.
Okay. And because it sounded like he said Asherah rather than Ashtaroth. I don't know if that's just if the translator decided to just change it or not.
Well, in the you said New Revised Standard, so NRSV. Okay. So yeah, that's the translation here. They put his armor in the temple of Astarte.
Oh,
Yeah.
But then it also says that the Hebrew there is plural.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Astarte, Ashtaroth is the same one, and I think
Ashtaroth.
Asherah is just Asherah, right? That's the English name. Or is
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Astarte is like the same as Ishtar, right?
Sort
Or
of.
is it like, or those were
I
combined
think
later?
so. Or they were like a common ancestry kind of a vibe, or
Yeah, there's a few goddesses with very similar names that get confused with each other. So.
are you telling me
Yeah,
that
people love to they love to mess with that.
Find these
Like there was, oh my
connections.
god,
Yeah.
I posted this not that long ago in the Discord. It was like the whole Israel thing, like uh the first like is from Isis, and Ra is just the god Ra, and then El is like, and I'm like, oh my god, this is awful.
No.
They love pulling that shit.
If you're talking about two very similar names in the same area or in two areas that are neighboring and have been, arguing with each other and fighting and, taking over each other for generation upon generation, then yeah, that's probably kind of more or less different versions of the same goddess. But you can't just go to anything that sounds vaguely like it anywhere in the world and be like, oh yeah, totally, same days.
Yeah, like El, sure, but then like Ra and Isis. Like,
no.
ugh.
Jesus Christ, no. Fucking hell.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know today if Friday is named after Freya or Flea. Frigga.
Frigga? Yes, that's her name.
Or Flea, yeah. But it's not, yeah, some languages pronounce the G's as Y's as well, so that's probably where they got confused. But yeah, like, yeah, mixing up goddesses seems to be something that men did for a long time. They're the same.
Yes, well, all I know is from the last version of this conversation, I get to have 3 husbands.
I mean, people even confuse, was it Bastet and
Basset.
what's the other one? Like
Sekhmet.
there's one which is Sekhmet, yeah, the lion head and the cat head.
They are different versions of the same goddess. There was a process of domestication where Sekhmet became Bastet. In somewhere in the one of the versions of Egyptian mythology. It's a really old fucking religion, so it has a lot of stories, and they're not all from the same era.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue on verse 10. They fastened his body to the wall of Beth Sha'an. McCarter writes that Beth Sha'an was an old Canaanite city, which was under Philistine control, and is identified as modern Tel El Hushin. 1 Chronicles 10:10 reads, they impaled his head in the temple of Dagon. Kimchi wrote that both events happened, and, quote, that which wasn't mentioned here, i.e. in 1 Samuel, is mentioned there in 1 Chronicles. On verse 12, they burned him. Klein writes that the mention of their bodies being burned is strange, given that there is no evidence for the toleration or use of cremation in Israel. Moreover, the account in 1 Chronicles does not state that their bodies were burned. Cremation was used as a capital punishment for certain violations of biblical law, as we see in Leviticus 20:14, 21:9, and Joshua 7:25. And burning corpses was usually considered an awful crime in the Hebrew Bible, according to Amos 2:1. Klein notes Bud's opinion that the burning was added by a scribe who wished to denigrate Saul's memory. However, others view this act in a more neutral or positive manner. Targum reads, they kindled for them a fire as they used to kindle for the kings there. Van Stardijn Solman writes that Targum links the burning up to the ancient and well-established practice of burning the royal accessories in honor of a deceased king, as we see in Jeremiah 34:5, 2 Chronicles 16:14, and 21:19. Tsumura notes C.H. Gordon's observation that cremation is attested throughout Indo-European epics, with the burning of Saul possibly linked to Hittite custom over land, even as they were presumably linked by Philistine costume imported by sea. Kara, Ditrani, and Bar-Efrat wrote that the people burnt spices to mask the stench of the rotting corpses. Likewise, Klein notes Driver's suggestion that the verb saraf here means anoint with resinous spices, and that the Jebusites carried out a form of embalming. He writes, however, that this is only possible immediately after a person's death. Kimchi and Abravanel suggested that the corpses already had maggots in them, and the Jebusites did not want to bury them with the maggots in them, since it was disgraceful, and so they burned their flesh and buried their bones. Auld writes that the burning of the recovered bodies may have been intended to forestall any further Philistine attempt to reacquire recognizable trophies. Tsumura writes that burning was, quote, to guarantee that the bodies would not be exposed again, end quote, according to Brichto, rather than to, quote, to avoid, quote, a risk of infection from the quickly decomposing bodies, end quote, according to Baldwin.
This actually makes sense.
Right. So
Yeah.
no, I was just gonna say I was confused about what was going on there, but it looks like the suggestion is that this is the replacement of the scene with the stomach to mean sud off, to mean to anoint the dead with oil, as opposed to sud off meaning to burn. Okay.
You could argue
Interesting.
it either way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this group from Jabesh Gilead they're one of those groups that's like not part of the original Israelites, but they've made a covenant they've fought with Saul. They are loyal to him. David only gets on their good side by like crediting them for having treated Saul with dignity. So they are, in a sense, non-Israelites are the ones who go but they're more loyal to him than his own people, to go and claim his body and protect it from further abuse and honor it in perhaps not quite the traditional Jewish ways, but the ways perhaps of their own people or what have you, or just whatever was most possible given the circumstances, which were obviously not
keep in mind that Saul saved the people of Yabesh Gilad from the Hashdi Ammonite in chapter 11.
Exactly. So they're still loyal to him beyond even his own people, it seems.
Okay, on verse 13, they buried them under a tamarisk tree at Yabesh. Hebrew for tamarisk tree is Eshel. According to 1 Chronicles 10:12, Saul and his sons were buried under, quote, the oak tree Ha'elah in Jabesh, end quote. Kimchi writes that Eshel is a generic name for every tree, and 1 Chronicles specifies what type of tree it was. Likewise, Vulgate reads the wood of Yabesh. McCarter writes that Elah is, quote, a far more frequently mentioned tree, and therefore less likely to have been original to the account, end quote. Tsumura, however, writes that statistics do not decide originality, and that, quote, frequency could be just an accident, end quote. Auld notes that Saul had earlier held court at Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in 22:6. The Septuagint reads, under the cultivated ground of Yabesh. A reading reflected by Josephus in Antiquities 6:377, quote, the Jabessinians buried the bodies in the most beautiful place in their country called Aurora, end quote. Peshitta reads, under the almond tree in Yabesh, reading Shaked instead of Eshel. Yeah. And finally, they fasted 7 days. Fasting is a sign of mourning, as we see in 2 Samuel 1:12 and 3:35. We find mourning periods lasting for 7 days in the Bible, like in Genesis 50:10 and Job 2:13, but not a fasting of 7 days. Kimchi and Abravanel wrote that this was in remembrance of the 7 days which Nachash the Ammonite gave the people of Yabesh Gilead, as seen in 1 Samuel 11:3, during which Saul saved them. Bar-Efrat writes that the length of the fasting indicates the terrible feelings following the death of the king and of the great defeat. And now for the Christians. Bede. Yeah. Bede writes that the Philistines overtaking
You guys
of
are
Saul
always just making fun of the Christians.
because they are funny.
Terrible.
Yeah.
So I know,
Bede writes.
poor snowflakes.
So Bede writes that the Philistines' overtaking of Saul and his sons illustrates the corruptive power of heresies.
We couldn't just have a fucking battle
Yeah.
and people die in them, because that's the whole point of war.
Yeah. Verecundus writes that Saul was struck by the spiritual arrows of the Lord.
Instead of, his own sword or the spiritual arrows.
Yeah.
Well, it was
No, but he's talking about
the archers who
archers.
found him, isn't it?
Well, they wounded him,
Oh, those guys. Yeah,
so
right,
you know.
Yeah.
He got
Yeah,
he was
spiritual arrows. Yeah.
Yeah, he was either wounded or
Pincushion.
Yeah.
scared. Yeah.
He writes, "These are the spiritual arrows of the Lord with which he strikes the heart of the human race and drains our spiritual blood." For
So God
Wow,
is Cupid now.
that got a lot darker than it probably should have.
When
Yeah.
did God become a vampire?
Oh, God! I have a joke for this.
Vampire
No, I
Cupid.
can't think of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard vampire Jesus, and I've heard necromancer God, but I haven't heard vampire God.
yeah.
There's
There's a Twilight joke somewhere in there.
Oh no, those aren't vampires. They're
Osiris
fairies. They
is
glitter in
kind
the
of-
sun.
Which is the green Egyptian god? Like he's like a mummy, but he's a god.
Osiris. Yeah.
Oh,
Osiris.
Osiris. Yeah.
And finally, Bede writes that Saul's armor bearer mystically represents the teachers of the law, whose weapons are the words of spiritual teaching.
When was Bede?
Around
Six.
700.
How? Wow,
7th
eh?
century. 7th century.
Oh,
So
They
no,
could have
7th to
literally-
8th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
could have literally have just said that the armor bearer is the
Listen.
disciples of Jesus who, after Jesus was murdered by the Romans, they were persecuted by the Romans as well. or something.
Listen, I'll say this for the early and the medieval Christian commentators who I think have this far better than many modern Christian commentators, that reducing these sorts of texts of war and violence and oppression to spiritual themes and ideas is a lot better than insisting on, the notion that this is the word of God and it preserves accurate history and is illustrative of actions that we should be taking today. So,
That's a fair point. The problem is a lot of Christians insist on that everything has a spiritual lesson to it, but also that it's
Oh,
literally
sure.
true and we should do that, which is
Ye-
like, dude, no. Pick a struggle.
Yeah, I'm done.
but they are funny.
They are.
They
They
are.
are. They are funny.
What did you? I might have. Sorry, I might have not heard you, Tomo. What did you say about them burning the bodies, possibly?
What?
That was a
Oh,
while
that's-
ago.
Oh,
Well-
you're
Never
talking
been-
about set off the burning.
Oh, you did. Yeah, you did mention Seraph.
Of
As a,
Saul.
Yeah,
body.
that I think. I mean, yeah, Kara and Ditrani also thought that this like burning spices to mask the
right,
stench.
because like burning a body is not seen as a legitimate
Yeah.
way of disposing
Yeah.
of a body. Okay.
I think I kind of like that. I think I like that explanation though. As I understand it, they took the verb set off with the Samic meaning to anoint a body with spices, and somebody changed it to
Ah.
set off meaning to burn as a means of integrating the memory of Saul. I think I kind of like that explanation.
Yeah, I mean Steinsaltz mentions
Makes sense.
like that maybe they built a bonfire because that was a customary rite on the death of a king. Yeah, and some explain that they did scorch the flesh with pungent spices, or burnt the corpses because they had become maggot infested. I don't know where he
Yeah.
got those from, but yeah.
Yeah, from Kim, I know that
presumably-
Kimch's commentary on like
Mm.
it's they wanted to avoid.
And then
maggots or something.
Matt White says, Tomer, when they say cleave, is this related to the word they use to say an animal is clean and can be eaten, cleft, cloven, hooved?
I have no idea what this refers to.
He's asking, Morris is asking if the Hebrew
No.
word for cleave, as in to cleave
The
to somebody, is
davach,
related
no.
to being,
Tavach.
yeah, it's
No.
two separate
No.
words. And also
No.
in English, they were two separate words as well. Like one is, I think there's actually, if you know Dutch, there's like kleben and kleben. And they're two different words. So in English, they just, because of the spelling changes over time, they ended up being spelt the same and pronounced the same. But they do have different origins.
Oh,
Peter, any
And I
thoughts?
think there's another comment. Yeah, Peter, are those words that you use nowadays?
I have no clue.
He's AFK.
I have no clue. I don't
Yeah,
think there was a
would you
there was
say,
a follow-up coming. Say again?
No, I'm saying in Dutch, would you say kleben and kleben as two different words? Maybe it's pronounced different as well. Whatever. Or maybe I'm thinking of German. Whatever.
I don't think Peter is Dutch.
I don't think. Yeah, we say clove wood, so
Lol.
not related.
That means to cut in part.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably similar. Okay, cool.
I have to be honest. I have no clue what it's in German. Maybe the chat can help out.
Okay, there we go. What's the next one?
Probably not.
I think like one is more similar. I think one is like if you go back to like Indo-European, it's gonna give you like the same origin as glue, right? To cleave, glue, stick together, and the other one is more similar to like climbing or whatever. Don't worry about it. Was there another comment?
No.
Yes.
Oh.
Give me just a second. I'll jump back over to that.
Our
Okay.
religious nut in the chat is a Muslim, and he started copy pasting French for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. It's not on here. All right. All right. Are we done?
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay. And any comments before next week?
Yes. Look out for another way that Saul dies. Make sure to join the Discord
And also one of my favorite poems in the Bible, in my opinion.
Oh, right, yeah, the one where
the Lover's Lament.
Yes, that one. So, and also, if you haven't yet, subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists, because very soon, I'll be releasing a video on biblical cosmology.
Yes, finally.
Yeah, I'm about
I've been teasing that for a year.
No, I for a while. I've been working on it for 2 years. So it was a lot of research. I wrote the script and then I gave it to a friend who's a layperson, and she was like, "Listen, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about." So I was like, "Okay, fine, I'll rewrite the." I rewrote the entire thing. Like I want it to be understandable to lay people.
And then he gave it to me, and I said, "Listen, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about."
And then I also wanted it to be useful for scholars, but understandable for lay people. So it turned out it's going to be an hour and a half, and I'm close to finishing the editing.
Nice.
You know, I think there is a real need to translate what scholars know to normal people, like Richard Carrier's write up on how we know Daniel is a forgery. Everyone in scholarship knows this. Nobody outside of scholarship had any clue.
Listen. Can I just say, because it annoys the hell out of me, that Carrier's ideas about Daniel being a forgery are kind of nonsense. In that you can maybe apply that to Daniel 7 through 12, the Hebrew visions, in which these are actually written in the first person, but the Aramaic tales of Daniel were always, for the longest time, just understood to be stories about Daniel and his friends. They weren't, thought to be authored by Daniel. Yeah, it was these fun stories about this guy Daniel. So sorry,
I've always categorized it together as Esther as being like almost like a novel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, valid,
But,
or a collection of short stories.
So all that earlier stuff, it's not a forgery, guys. It's just this is
the prophecy
Carrier
stuff is
reading these texts through his modern lenses.
Well, yeah, but the problem is a lot of people are taught through the modern lenses that, Moses wrote the Pentateuch and Daniel wrote Daniel and all these things. It's like, no, just all of the no. And I mean, the prophecies in the 2nd century vibe part obviously is perhaps a little more appropriate to use as the term forgery, because they were clearly much later and with a political motivation in mind. But Yeah. Things get crazy
I'll
when
get
you
some
think that God wrote a book.
Until you read the Temple Scroll.
Yeah.
But I've got some stuff going on this week. Can I share?
Yeah, shill it.
Why not?
Shill it, yeah. On Thursday evening, I'm very excited. On my channel, Dr. Josh Bowen. Maybe some of you guys have heard of him.
Never.
And I will be having a conversation with Old Testament scholar at Temple University, Mark Luchter, all about the methodological problems with attempting to set the text of the book of Joshua into the early Iron Age and why we know it's not a straightforward historical account of things that happened. And we'll end up talking a lot about the setting for the book of Joshua and who's writing it and who they're writing it to. So that'll be fun. Check that out. And then on, I think it's Friday, I'm going to be on a channel called I think it's in the Intellectual Catholic or Intellectual Catholicism or something like that. Don't let that name scare you. The guy who runs it is a good guy, and he embraces critical scholarship, and that's always totally great in my books. But we'll be talking more about the book of Joshua and the historicity of the conquest narratives. And then I believe on Sunday we should be having another episode of Diablo Critics, but I haven't planned anything for that yet. So
It's been a while for Diablo Critics.
I know, right? Well, we took August off because it's August. So yeah.
I posted
Are you
Dr.
trying
Kipp's
to
links
imply
in
that you
the.
have lives?
I posted Dr. Kipp's links in the
Oh,
chat, and
thank
since
you.
I posted them twice, and Lawrence's links only once, I do want to add, if you subscribe to Lawrence, also send him a super chat so he can buy a bigger Quran, so he doesn't have to lean across the table every single time he wants to read from it.
Yeah, that's what we need, more Qurans. You're muted, Lilith.
You're muted. Lilith.
Sorry, I was saying you need the really big one with the the artistic scrolls and stuff. If
We
you're gonna have a crazy holy book, have
we
a
do.
pretty
It's like
one.
this. It's like this big. It's enormous.
Mm.
That's one of the Qurans that we
That's-
have. And then we
Right,
have
isn't
others.
it like it's not a huge book though, is it? Like,
No,
in
no,
terms
but
of
this
the
this
content?
one has it has both the English, the Arabic, and actually
Oh, yeah, okay.
multiple of our Qurans have the English, the Arabic, and also commentary.
Oh, which English version is it?
Oh, I forget all their names. But one of them is by someone, the one that I find enjoyable for me to read at least, because it just makes a lot more sense. It's closer to today's English. It's I think his name is Musan Muhammad Ali. So that's the one that's one of the ones I've been using on the show. That's enjoyable.
Hey, has the Quran been translated into Hebrew?
I have
Yes,
no idea.
it,
That's a
I
good
think.
question.
Yes, I think. Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, sure.
I saw. I remember seeing the Quran translated to Hebrew in some libraries. So yeah, I know there is
Wow.
one version translated by someone, but who was it? Uri Rubin, I guess. Oh yeah, Uri Rubin. Yeah.
Wonder if it's been translated into Klingon,
Probably.
I have no doubt the Bible.
or
has
maybe it
been
was
translated
maybe
into Klingon.
maybe it's better in the original Klingon.
The Book of
I don't know.
Mormon.
I have a
probably be
lolcat
interesting.
Bible. I don't have a lolcat Quran.
A lolcat. What's
Lolcat.
Lolcat.
Is that like nyan 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 nyan?
Kip's too old for this.
Oh god.
All right. Are we done?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we should be done.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. Good night. Good weekend.
Bye, everybody. Join Discord.
Um,